Hello, our lab today is called Mystery Powders because we've been given two unknown substances that we need to identify what they are. And they've only been identified with numbers like number 2 or number 12. Number 12. So these are our two unknowns, and they are going to be either table salt, sodium chloride, cornstarch, baking soda, baking powder, or cream of tartar, or perhaps a mixture of these. So again, our unknowns are labeled with number 2 and 12, and it will be either one of these 5 known substances. We're going to identify what our unknown is by examining the physical properties of the unknowns and comparing them to the knowns, and by comparing the way that the different substances react and behave with some different liquids. So our first task is to collect some data about the characteristics of our different powders, the known powders, and the known liquids. So I'd like you to complete your data chart as we go through this. So let's go through each one of these 5 different white solids. This is sodium chloride. It is white, and it is a solid clearly, and it is crystalline in nature. This is baking powder. Baking powder is also white, but not a bright white like the sodium chloride. So it's a little bit more of an off-white. It's also definitely a powder, so it's not crystalline, and it does have a little bit of a clumping activity. Here is a baking soda. Baking soda is a bright white, and it's a very fine powder, very fine. This is starch. Starch is a creamy color. Does tend to do a little bit of clumping. And the very last one is cream of tartar, which is definitely much more creamy colored and definitely very thick in consistency and texture. Tends to also clump a bit. All right, let's take a look at our different liquids we're going to be dealing with. Here's liquid 1. It is clear and colorless. Liquid 2 is a clear and dark orange, like a burnt orange color. Liquid 3 is clear and colorless. And liquid 4 has got a forest green kind of color. We're going to take each of our solids and we're going to mix them, each of our known solids, and we're going to mix them with the different liquids. Now I'm going to organize my experimental setup to match what your data chart looks like. So I have this grid. So I'm going to start with sodium chloride, and I'm going to go ahead and add sodium chloride, just a small amount of it, into each of the wells in the first row. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the liquid to each of the wells. When I add liquid 1, I don't notice any change. When I add liquid 2, no change. When I add liquid 3, no change. When I add liquid 4, no change. All right, let's do the same process with the baking powder. Liquid 1 is added to baking powder. I don't see a lot of change. When I add liquid 2 to the baking powder, I see bubbles. I see small bubbles, and I see that it turned quite dark. almost dark blue or black. When I add liquid 3, definitely get bubbles. And when I add liquid 4, looks like there's a change in color to like a red kind of color. Let's see what happens as time goes on. I'm also going to stir it. So I definitely see an orangey kind of color there. Let's see if that any of that changes. All right, let's go on to the next one. This is baking soda. We'll add each of the liquids. Liquid 1, don't see anything. Liquid 2, no change. Liquid 3 to the baking soda, lots of bubbles. And liquid 4, no change. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the starch. Liquid 1, no change when added to the starch. Liquid 2, oh, it turns dark. Dark black or blue. Liquid 3, no change when added to the starch. Liquid 4, don't see anything at the moment, but let's stir it. Or the other one, remember this one now, the liquid 4 with the baking powder looks like a paler green. And this one looked a little different before. It's gone back to the original color again. Okay, let's try one more cream of tartar. And let's add our different liquids. Nothing with the liquid 1. Nothing with liquid 2. Nothing with liquid 3. Liquid 4 changed dramatically to a red-pink kind of color. All right, now that we have our data for the known substances, let's see how our unknowns behave. So let's start with number 2. All right, let's add liquid 1. Don't see much happening. Well, there might be a bubble or so. Very tiny. Let's add liquid 2. Definitely turned dark. And I also see some bubbles there as well. Let me just mix. I do see some bubbles, tiny. Liquid 3, definitely bubbles. And liquid 4, looks like there was an immediate sort of change in color. Let's see what happens over time. So there is the data for solid number 2. Let's move on to number 12. Let's add liquid 1. Don't see anything happening. Let's add liquid 2. No change. Liquid 3. Oh, lots of bubbles. Lots of bubbles. And liquid 4. Don't really see any sort of change. All right, our next task is, of course, to compare the results of unknown 2 with any of the ones that are above it, and to compare unknown 12 with any of the ones above it. So again, our unknowns need to match one of the knowns. So if you took good data, your data should be enough to be able to identify it. So again, let's go over the unknown. The unknown, I don't see any sort of change. Maybe there were some bubbles here. This one turned it like a dark, and I did see some little bubbles here. Maybe there might have been a few bubbles. They're all gone now, but I see some bubbles within there, and this one is looking like greenish, but a different shade of green than we had before. Our unknown 12, nothing, lots of bubbles here, and no change here. So hopefully that's good enough for you to make an assessment of your unknowns.